All right, cool. I am ready to go whenever. So whenever you guys want to start, feel.
Yeah, just give us like 30 seconds.
Wait, if we're not starting right now, is it okay if I can be back in like 2 seconds? Like just to
Yeah.
go. Right.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay, so y'all ready now? Okay. Okay, so before we start, you're gonna want 2 sheets. It's gonna be like a one-off, and then it's gonna move into case. Just so everyone knows. Okay, so everyone cool? Okay. Let me go.
Oh wait, what's the one-off?
It's just gonna be like an interp.
Okay.
All right. Is everyone ready? All right, then we can start now. A is the interpretation. Debaters should refrain from using gender discriminatory language in route to promote inclusion and prevent misgendering fellow debaters or judges. B is the violation. The use of you guys clearly discriminates against non-binary folks in the debate space, making them feel unincluded and unsafe, further perpetuating the gender exclusionary role public forum debate already exhibits. C is the role of the ballot. Drop the debaters for verbally participating in gender discrimination instead of round. McGill University explains in 2019 that the use of you guys instead of gender neutral phrases such as y'all, you all folks, you folks, you friends, you people, even calling us by name, etc., directly demonstrates and excludes women as well as non-binary folks. If you use gender neutral terms, you never violate. Misgendering is never okay. Exclusion is never okay. Drop them. 2 impacts. First is discourse. By advancing us into later rounds or voting up the theory, you signal to the rest of the debate community that they do not just stand down and be silent when they feel excluded or violated in the debate space. We aren't saying our opponents are bad people, but rather they have fallen victim to the exclusionary norm that remains in public forum and has escaped most other forms of debate. Gender neutral terms are a must, especially when our pronouns are easily accessible on tab room. Second is education. 2 warrants. First, exclusion is the easiest way to make a debate round less educational, but making debaters feel as if they don't belong here, you decrease the educational value of the round for them. Inclusion is a prerequisite to equal education. Second, this is an underrepresented issue. W18 explains that the movement against you guys has grown, but only at a very slow pace insofar as the talk in the Persian Gulf is more discourse at this tournament, but also around the world we prefer topics that don't get talked about enough as they offer more educational value. With that being said, let's move into case we affirm. Our sole contention is the blood, white, and blue. Since the dawn of the Vietnam War, U.S. intervention has become the norm. Since the time we were young and we were told that America is protecting us from the bad guys without ever raising the question of who really should be considered the bad guy. U.S. intervention, in fact, opposite of what we've been taught, is the root cause of issues, and it's high time we recognize it. U.S. influence in the Persian Gulf perpetuates human rights abuses in 3 key ways. First is Uncle Sam slavery. Pennant of the Guardian reports that the U.S. military is a root cause of sexual abuse and slavery in the Persian Gulf, finding that it's unknown how many women in Iraq and the Gulf have been assaulted, but the number is very large and continues to grow with U.S. influence. In fact, Parsons No. 6 explains that once deployed, this military is the one who drives demand for sex slaves, which is why he concludes that no matter what, there will always be sex trafficking as long as there's large amounts of military deployment. With Houghton 19 finding that the sex trafficking of women and girls by U.S. military men remains an issue plaguing U.S. military bases overseas. This is some of the highest forms of denial of human rights, as the negative knowingly negates the right to be human for countless women in the Middle East and around the world. Second is taunting Iraq. Hughes of the School of Political Science finds that the United States constructed the Iraqis to seem like a threat to justify atrocities and invasion. This lens seemed ideal to explain the treatment of Iraq, with Hughes further explaining that the sense of threat are socially constructed rather than actually present. Edward of the Columbia University finds that Washington used the push for democracy and freedom in Iraq terms of westernization as a mask for pillage, occupying something militarily and failing miserably at the same time, which is why Hassan in 08 reports that the U.S. has been committing inhumane atrocities and murders in Iraq. They have diverted the public's attention from the genocide by framing the nation as a threat, ultimately indicating 1.5 million innocent Iraqi civilians have been killed, and the majority of the victims tend to be women and children, with the occupation-generated violence displacing at least 4.7 million Iraqis. Worse, the WS in 2020 reports that currently the U.S. has deployed troops in Iraq in attempts to recolonize the Middle East once more, which is why there's mass protests from Iraqi citizens asking the U.S. to leave their country. The only reason things like war are ever justifiable is because we don't value human rights first. Fourth is racism. Hassan in 8 reports that U.S. influence in Iraq has turned to the newest form of the white man's burden, where the U.S. believes that they, as the white men, know what's best and have the right to have a presence in Iraq and the Gulf region. Ray 05 concludes it brings us back to the racist roots of manifest destiny, believing that we have a right to influence purely because we're the white man. And Batar 07 concludes that to advocate for the idea that U.S. influence is necessary for Iraqi stability is a racist description of the non-Western world that ensures genocide and unending war. Shakeen 07 explains that this racism was already used to justify genocide in Iraq, that it will continue if this imperialist nature of U.S. isn't completely rejected. MET2K adds that it is the highest moral duty to reject racism before anything else, as to even let the monster of racism into the house is to deny what is human and make anything justifiable in the name of racism. Thus, affirm.
Sorry, I didn't catch some parts of the case. Is it by any chance possible you could at least put like a speech doc of everything that you read absent the off?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Got it? Or do you want me to put it in?
Did you guys send it? Are we good?
Yeah, it's being sent right now. We just got to add you to the, who we're sending it to.
Mhm.
Sorry, I didn't get y'all's disclosure on the speech or on the email chain. Is it did you already send it, or is it just not showing up for me?
Yeah, we just sent the case.
Okay. Sorry, can you just give me 1 second before my partner reads case?
Yeah.
Okay, this is cool. All right, yeah.
We good, CJ? We negate. Contention 1 is destabilization. Macumzi 20 finds that the removal of U.S. troops would weaken Kurdistan, a region in northern Iraq currently being supported by U.S. president that wants to be autonomous. This has two possible scenarios. First is an Iraqi civil war. Macumzi continues that due to deep-rooted ethnic and sectarian divides between this region and the central government of Baghdad, as they follow different denominations of Islam, removal of U.S. forces from Iraq is dangerous as the gap between the central government in Baghdad and that of Kurdistan would widen, increasing risk of internal religious conflicts. Kadar 20 finds that the last major religious war in the region killed over 1 million people. Second is a Turkish invasion. The Washington Post 19 indicates that Turkey is fearful that Kurdish forces are gaining influence close to the Turkish border, creating significant nationalist anger against the group. A U.S. withdrawal would open up the floodgates for Turkey. This is empirically confirmed as BBC 19 finds that when U.S. troops withdrew from northern Syria, Turkey has been conducting operations against Kurdish-led forces in the region. If we withdraw troops and an invasion occurs, Global Guerrillas of 7 finds that it would lead to a de facto war between Iraq and Turkey, which Barnaby 93 finds could go nuclear, and Star 15 finds would lead to extinction. Our second contention is preventing a blow-up. Fisher 16 of Vox explains that the status quo Saudi Arabia and Iran are locked in this Cold War. Saudi Arabia and Iran see each other as enemies and are locked in a competition for influence and dominance for the Middle East. Their competition is a driver of conflict in the Middle East. Luckily, Quartzman 18 writes that U.S. presence creates a balance of forces which ensures this conflict stays cold. Egypt and Algeria are focused on their own internal stability. Their roles in the region have sharply diminished. Iraq and Syria both must deal with instability problems, and our European allies have declining power projection capabilities. It is the U.S. presence in the region that create a balance of forces that firmly deters Iran. This isn't just a debate argument. Merrily 20 writes that in January, Iran didn't start a Middle Eastern war because they were afraid of the US attacking American interests would amount to suicide. He said American military power is so disproportionate compared to Iran that Khamenei would essentially be inviting the destruction of his own country. Crosby 19 writes that the US leaving the region would spark this war by creating a power vacuum. The unique mix of political forces in the Middle East suggests possibilities in the event of US withdrawal from the region, and none favor US interests. Iran defeats Saudi Arabia in a regional confrontation or a long-term regional war between Tehran and an influctuating anti-Iran coalition composed of Saudi Arabia, other Sunni Gulf states, and Israel would cause widespread bloodshed. Both Iran and Saudi Arabia would be likely to attempt a nuclear breakout. Either way, the impact would be devastating, killing millions. Additionally, Dansky 19 quantifies that the macroeconomic implications of Middle East tensions, if the situation de-escalates into a war, oil prices spike all the way up to US dollars of $150 per barrel for some time. It would be a shock that we believe would tip the world into recession. Algate quantified that in 2010, a higher oil price would increase food price, and an increase of $1 in oil price leads to an increase of about 5.6 points in food prices. This quickly pushes people into poverty. Caldwell 17 quantifies the increases in food prices disproportionately affect the poor, both in the United States and abroad. Every 20% increase in food prices will push 100 million more people into the ranks of the poor, living on less than $1 a day. The Washington Examiner 08 finds that this kills millions when the Arab oil cartel pushed oil prices in December of 1973. It was a catastrophe. A direct fall in incomes means malnutrition and related epidemics. The number of Africans and Asians who died in consequence were calculated to be tens and tens of millions. Thus, we negate.
We're gonna take a little bit of prep time.
Wait, real quick.
Oh, yeah.
Y'all's first contention was kind of lagging for us. Would you mind just sending something over the email chain? Thank you.
You just want our first contention, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Subash, can you take care of that?
Sure.
And then we'll run prep after it's sent in the email chain.
All right, yeah, that sounds good.
I sent it.
Okay, you can, cool. So, you ready for cross?
We're gonna run a bit of prep.
Okay, all right.
Also,
I'm ready for a cross.
also, I don't see anything
Uh,
in the email.
let me send it again.
Okay, thank you.
Are y'all just like putting it in the Google Doc?
What's up?
Are y'all just putting it in the Google Doc, or are you sending it how we sent it?
I think we're just sending it how y'all sent it.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it good now?
Yeah, we don't see anything.
I just saw it.
Okay. I'm refreshing.
It just came through for me.
Okay, yeah, I just realized what happened. Hold on. I think I have it. I just don't think when I sent y'all our case, I didn't think I added him to the email chain. So he's just gonna be looking at my laptop while we do cross. Yeah, here it is. Okay, that's our bad. All right, so y'all ready?
Yeah.
Okay, start with case. So just on this whole thing about like tipping the world into a global recession, aren't we like isn't like recession at this point kind of non-unique insofar as like the entire global economy is kind of in like a downward spiral just because of like the epidemic that's broken out recently?
I would say that's not necessarily true because like that's very short term, right? The epidemic is going to only last for like a few months. And I don't think we should just be isolating events like coronavirus towards like the epidemic, like towards economic like factors. But even more so, like the right before corona even hit, we've been facing like record levels of employment and we've been facing like a lot of like jobs and stuff like that. So I feel like there's like a lot of like good economic things going right now. And if you were to vote pro in today's round, then it will like obviously spiral down because you see like oil prices increasing. And if oil prices increases, it just will exacerbate the next recession. But now can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so let's look at your off, right?
Yeah.
So how can we solve the problem?
We say you solve back by using gender neutral terms such as you folks, you people, referring to us by name, y'all, which me and my partner have been using. You just don't feed into the discriminatory gendered language that we talk about, such as you guys, the phrases that y'all have been using to describe us. You don't feed into that, and instead you use gender neutral terms.
If we agree that we start using gender neutral pronouns from now on, is that fine?
Here's the problem with the analysis. What we say is that you have to drop the debater, and then through being dropped, that's going to teach you in future rounds that you can't get away with that sort of behavior. Whereas if you win the round now and I don't know, you like take the W, essentially what's going to happen is that that's going to signal rather in future rounds that you can get away with that behavior if you just apologize. But we want to expel that behavior in general, and the only way you do that is through being dropped. Like we're not saying at all that you're bad people. We read that in the interp. What we're saying is that y'all fallen victim to the exclusionary norm that's been set in public forum, and that's the entire reason we read the interp.
Okay.
But okay, so can I take a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so just on to like, I don't know, oil prices skyrocketing. This is just contingent. Is this like contingent on your? Oh, actually, no. I have a better question. So, just Iraq and Turkey war going nuclear. How do they go nuclear if these countries don't have nuclear capabilities?
They definitely have nuclear capabilities. They've been developing their own nukes. But now, can I ask you a question before time runs out?
Yeah, sure.
On your first warrant, right?
Yeah.
Is it specifically about like PEMCs and private military contractors that are funded by the military? They're doing
No.
the bad deeds.
No, it's the U.S. military, like our inherent governmental presence.
Okay.
Okay. We're gonna take a little bit of prep.
Wait, so are y'all running prep right now? Okay.
So. So the order is going to be back to the one-off.
Sorry?
The order is going to be back to the one-off. And then after that, we're going to move into just like a weighing overview. And then we'll just move down your case. Okay, that's the time? Yeah. Cool. All right, everybody ready? Apologies don't access norm settings. At best, they mitigate in-round violation, but enable cyclical exclusion where people don't feel a need to watch their language carefully because they can't apologize. Even if they win that they mitigate the harm of violation, they can't undo it entirely. Non-male debaters will still feel excluded by the discourse before the apology is issued. Rejecting the team is the only way to prevent future abuse before it happens. Second, apologies prevent proliferation of the argument. Teams aren't willing to read a 30-second shell and get a 10-second apology that happens outside of speeches. This is a time skew that renders the argument invaluable and means that after this round, no one will ever again read this argument. Third, only guaranteed out of round publication is a result of the round. There's no way to check whether or not teams will produce discourse that legitimizes the K. So let your ballot speak for itself. Fourth, apologies are great, but making them a voter commodifies the ballot. A, apologies get tied to winning the round and become a response to the argument instead of a response to causing our impact. Make them apologize without a pass to the ballot. That's the only way to check out for like a genuine intent. B, commodifying the ballot forces judge intervention to evaluate the quality of the apology. The ballot becomes how well they apologize and excludes people with disabilities that prevent them from seeing it as genuine enough. Now with that, let's move into their case, starting with a weighing overview. The neg is focused on stopping future hypothetical crises. This is bad. This philosopher Chris Cuno explains in 1996 that this focus on future hypothetical crises of massive wars distracts from the oppression perpetuated by militarized agents and creates complacency due to destructive effects of overseas militarism and things like military interventions, because we're always focused on preventing low probability crises instead of addressing the violence sitting under our noses. Two implications. A, it's an independent reason to vote for us because the crisis rhetoric of their case is that and refines oppression by making the people in this round complacent to ongoing violence. B, it means our structural violence arguments always outweigh on probability and time frame. Their conflict scenarios will never happen, but racism and colonial violence are forms of ongoing high probability long-term violence. Without speaking in their case, starting on this idea of the Iraqi Civil War, Mature Simon explains that it's a racist ideology to believe that the United States needs to be in the region in order to prevent any of these like not coming to fruition. Insofar as like Iraq is like their own nation, we do not need the white man in order to prevent some sort of a war. That's just going to act as a turn on their case that feeds back into our case. Because we say that inherently when you say like the U.S. is the solve all problem to Iraqi problems, that's going to inherently result in like more racism and like it feeds into the same colonial ideology that's allowing racism to happen in the status quo that like justified genocide back in 2003 that led out through the entire decade. But then let's move on to this whole idea of like diplomacy, or like rather the aggression argument that they talk about. Even on this the argument, we would say that Phil and Saul, Wilkerson 20 explains that U.S. goal is a barrier preventing an alternative collective security arrangement. Luckily, voting out would allow China, India, Japan, and others to go in, sparking a mass diversification of security agreements. This matters for two reasons. A, first, it stabilizes the region, ultimates and furthers that replacements would not take sides in regional conflicts the way the U.S. has instead of work towards regional cooperation by bridging divides. B, second, it's comparatively better because the war over the United States stabilizes the region. Very 20 explains that since the shell revolution of the U.S. is no longer relying on Middle Eastern crude oil, domestic oil production accounted for 60% of total oil consumption, and more imports from crude oil from Canada and Saudi Arabia. Consequently, Gary continues that the United States no longer values regional stability and adopting exploratory measures in the Middle East and is acting as a force of instability. Conversely, China and Japan are still largely dependent on Middle Eastern crude oil, making regional stability the utmost priority. Now let's move on to this idea of Saudi Arabia. First, the Washington Post finds that Saudi Arabia will de-escalate before conflict becomes remotely probable. They explain that Saudi Arabia owes its successful peace talks to Iran in order to prevent abrupt chaos with the U.S. This means two things. One, that if the U.S. is the problem in the countries in the Middle East, can easily negotiate and prefer negotiation in order to prevent conflict. And second, that Saudi Arabia won't lash out as they don't feel secure in the U.S. backing the slow. This means that the absent U.S. presidents, negotiations will ensure security. The only one who is far time in negotiating is clearly the U.S. Rather, whose foreign negotiations is through the United States, which is why we say that withdrawal is crucial. But even ignoring that, pull up further and finding that the sole reason why the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and other Gulf states are lashing out in the status quo is because the United States is there. That's critical because what they find is that the security blanket of the United States is what's justifying these countries to lash out and begin to act aggressive towards Iran. Even at the end of the day, we would say that all of our arguments are going out with they're like low probability, and it is the structural violence that is occurring right now that masks and like allows for these wars to happen in the first place.
Sorry, a lot of the mic was cutting in and out for me. Can you guys just, or can you all just disclose the speech doc, please?
Yeah, we'll send the speech.
Yeah, that was pretty choppy. Next speech, make sure you're a little closer to the mic, please.
Yeah, all right, yeah, we'll send it right now.
Mm-hmm. Did y'all get a chance to put the email chain?
Yeah, I'm just copying it right now.
All right, thank you.
All right, we sent it to all y'all.
Sorry.
Yeah, we sent it to all y'all.
Oh, okay. Give me 1 second. Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Wait, sorry. Is it just me or? Oh wait, I'm sorry. I think my internet might just be slow.
Okay, yeah, no problems.
Okay, yeah, I see it. All right. Give me 1 second before I start running. All right, time starts now. Okay. All right. Um, so the order is honestly going to be kind of messy, but it will start with responding to their off,
Okay,
and then it will be, yeah, it will be responding to their off. Then we'll be reading a one off, and then, so yeah, might want another sheet of paper, and then
sure.
front lines, and then their case.
Okay, okay.
Wait, wait, sorry. Wait, there's a thing for like technical timeouts, right? Like if we have to like
Yeah, yeah.
or something. Okay, can we like run the clock on that? Because my phone's about to die.
All right, yeah, yeah, that's fine.
All right. Is everybody ready then?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Really quickly on their off, we completely apologize for whatever it is the violation that we made. We typically do not do this. For my partner specifically, I know he was the one who violated the interp on accident. English isn't even his first language. He speaks Telugu, which is a South Indian language. Like that's his first native language, right? And I've been watching myself. I haven't said you guys at all. I've only been saying y'all. I would argue that this is a very subconscious bias, and ultimately they're not going to solve for it. Specifically on this argument, I have a few responses. First, we would contend that this theory is literally just going to commodify the ballot in general. People are just going to always want to run this interp in order to get dubs and in order to win rounds, just as a quick, easy way to get their ballot signed. They're probably just going to end up lying in order to just quickly get like wins. But second of all, we also know friends that have lost to the shell before. A lot of people that we know, like Saratoga, for example, and we still did it anyways, even though we knew this theory was probably going to get read on us because it's something subconscious, as did all of the judges, which just proves which disproves their argument about how you should drop the debater to set good norms. It's a very subconscious thing. I think apologies should be a good thing because it at least means that people are trying to check back and watch for what they're doing. But finally, I would argue that the Ks in general and this type of rhetoric is bad. They read their K in a very exclusionary way with a lot of jargon, with a lot of rhetoric. A lot of people don't really understand these arguments. It's very exclusionary for small programs and small schools like us, which are literally from the middle of Ohio in rural areas where we also don't have the ability to understand arguments like this. Really quickly on our own one-off too, we interpret that before starting a speech, debaters must verbally disclose if their speech discusses non-graphic or graphic potentially triggering subjects such as sexual assault and other triggering material that they read, for example, because their entire case literally deals with sexual violence and assault, as well as to offer their speeches or as offered to alter their speeches according to the request of the opponents or judges. To clarify, they must read trigger warnings. The violation is they didn't. The standard is our sole standard is safety. Trigger warnings help survivors and reduce distress, and memories of trauma are more distressing without any warning than if the survivor intentionally thinks about their trauma. And unprompted triggering information can cause panic attacks, difficulty sleeping, and more. Trigger warnings respect that people must deal with their trauma when they are ready, and it is up to the survivor to decide when they are ready. Safety is an independent voter, which outweighs all other concerns in the round, because actions that harm the safety of this event harm individuals, push people out of the debate, and erode it as an activity. Safety is also the strongest internal link to fairness, because if debaters do not feel safe in a round, they cannot debate, which is definitionally unfair, and as well as destroys any sort of educational benefits from around. The D's of voters. Education is a voter because it's the only portable skill that you get in debate. Fairness is a voter because we concede fair adjudication of arguments when we make them. Drop the debater to justifications. First, wins and losses determine the direction of this event. Them losing to the shell tells others to read trigger warnings in PF. But second, once the safety of a round has been jeopardized, it cannot be undone. No competing interps to warrants. First, reasonability is arbitrary. We don't know what your meter is to evaluate a lot of BS arguments. But second, reasonability causes a race to the bottom. It incentivizes debaters to read increasingly unfair arguments and appeal to a reasonable standard. No RVIs. First, it denies the antecedent. They shouldn't win for proving they're fair. But second, it chills checking the abuse. Debaters won't read theory for fear of the RVI. This outweighs their you guys theory because our argument is literally about safety. They themselves disregard their interp. They literally refer to us as you guys too, without assuming what our pronouns are, for example, or even asking for them at the beginning of the round. They could have unknowingly triggered their interp as well. Now onto substance. So the thesis of their case is the idea that the United States justifies intervention and ultimately does pretty bad things. The issue with this is that what the Ulrichsen evidence that they also retells you is that the U.S. is ultimately and generally a very stabilizing presence in these regions. It ultimately deters conflicts and prevents it from ever happening in the first place. If the U.S. isn't there, the central argument that we're reading from our case is that more of these countries are going to start aggressing, and it's going to cause more and more human rights violations because we prevent the spread and the expansion of revisionist powers like Iran, which our case specifically tells you state-sponsored terrorism law and also increases abuses and things like that. Ultimately, we link into all of the weighing of the things they do. And then very quickly on their Ulrichsen overview, on our case, their evidence assumes that actors wouldn't take sides in a conflict, but this is pretty untrue. Actors probably already have existing bases and stuff in countries, which means they're probably going to pick sides. In fact, Lon's 19 indicates that A, China wants to fill in or wants any fill-in to be by itself, so there would be no huge agreement, and B, this view misses the hierarchical nature of China's partnerships in which it privileges relations with comprehensive strategic pillars above others. And then on our case, they only read this turn saying Saudi Arabia would aggress. That's not our argument. Saudi Arabia would go to peace. Iran becomes aggressive.
All right.
All ready for cross?
Oh, wait, no, it's my summer.
Okay.
Okay. What? Okay, yeah, we're just gonna take some prep for summary. Wait,
Yeah, all right. Are y'all ready for cross? Okay, yeah. Okay, for sure. So, all right, we'll start now. So on this idea about y'all still violating after you had already heard the interp, doesn't that just mean that y'all need to be dropped so that maybe it affects you more personally so that y'all will begin to shape your behavior better?
I mean, I think it's pretty true to say that a lot of people have lost to this show, like in probably like the past few months, and it's still.
And so what is that done?
It's sub.
That's, yeah,
So
yeah.
say
So
that
what is,
it puts defense on your norm.
yeah, so what has been done since people have lost to this show?
I mean, I think more people have probably been trying to read it just to get an easy dub.
No, that's not true.
I think it
right?
can sacrifice the ballot personally, because what you're essentially doing is being like, yo, you should like just drop the debater because they made a subconscious mistake.
No, but here's the inherent issue, right? Is that the goal of reading the interp is so that it becomes something that's conscious, right? And the issue is that obviously it wasn't something that y'all put as a first priority, otherwise you wouldn't have violated,
I mean,
right?
I have not violated the interp in this round.
Right.
My partner did it once at the very beginning when he was trying to say,
Right. And we'll talk more about that in summary.
Also say you guys without even asking us about our pronouns or anything either. So you also triggered.
Wait, when did we say you guys? We never said that.
You did. Literally at the very beginning of the round. You're like, will
Wait,
you?
I'd
love to see I'd love to see after the live stream's over where we violated. But
we definitely never violated.
Yeah, I'm actually totally down for that. But yeah.
Okay, yeah, for sure, because we definitely did not violate at all. For sure. Do y'all have a question?
I mean, should debaters read trigger warnings?
I mean, if something's graphic, yeah, but we'll also talk more about that in summary. Okay. So specifically on this language barrier, how do you prevent people with language barriers from violating in the future?
I mean, I think just apologies in general should be enough, right? I mean, with an apology, you can at least guarantee that like someone is at least going to try not to do it again. Like,
but in the future,
like I personally really don't know how to handle like arguments like this. So I'm just saying like whatever.
We come from a small school as well, and this is actually our second ever theory round. The reason why we're reading the interp is because we're tired of
theory round. So
sure. So the reason why we're reading this interp is because we're tired of the continual misuse of gendered language in round, right? That personally affects our team. And so by reading this interp, we think that it's a good thing, and we think that it's good for small schools because it's not really as much about the interp, and we're not trying to win rounds, we're just trying to spread discourse.
All right, for sure.
That makes sense. Y'all have a question, or I don't know how much time is left in the cross.
I didn't time it, my bad.
Okay, for sure. Neither did I, so I'm sure it's over.
Yeah, probably.
Can I get done? Yeah. All right. So just some prep for my summary. Okay, so here's how this is going to go. Wait, hold on, give me a sec. Okay, it's just gonna be all theory, interp, trigger warning theory, and then just frontlining the responses they made on our theory during their rebuttal. So with that being said, is everyone ready? Okay, cool. A's the interpretation debate should refrain from using gender discriminatory language in round to promote inclusion and prevent misgendering like fellow debaters or judges. These are violations. These have you guys clearly discriminate against non-binary folks in the debate space, making them feel unincluded and unsafe, further perpetuating the gender exclusionary role public forum debate already exists. Seize the role of the ballot. Drop the debaters for verbally participating in gender discrimination inside of round. McGill University explains in 2019 that the use of you guys instead of gender neutral phrases such as y'all, you all, you folks, you friends, you people, even calling us by name, etc., directly demonstrates and excludes women as well as non-binary folks like myself. If you use gender neutral terms, you never violate like the shell. Misgendering is never okay. Exclusion is never okay. Drop them now. 2 impacts. First is discourse. By advancing us in a later round of voting up the theory, you signal to the rest of the debate community that they do not have to stand down and be silent when they feel excluded or violated in the debate space. We aren't saying our opponents are bad people, but are fallen victims to exclusionary norm that remains in public forums that escape most other forms of debate. Gender neutral terms are a must, especially when our pronouns are easily accessible on tab rooms. Second is education. 2 warrants. First, exclusion is the easiest way to make debate round less educational, but making debaters feel as if they don't belong here. You decrease the educational value of the round for them. Inclusion is like a prerequisite to any equal education. Second, this is an underrepresented issue. Debbie 18 explains that the movement against you guys has grown, but only at a very slow pace and so far as like the topic of Persian involves more discourse in this tournament, but also around the world for topics that don't get talked about enough as they offer more educational value. Now, onto the responses they make. They just try to they try to pause and say that like it's not their native language. It doesn't have to be your native language to say y'all or you folks. My mom's Mexican. She came here when she was 20. She can understand English. She still abides by my like specific pronouns. Now they just say that it's a subconscious bias. Like recognize the intrinsic reason we are reading this theory is so that we can break that bias, so people start abiding by pronouns. So I myself don't feel excluded. So other non-binary folks don't feel excluded. This is the best way to promote education within the debate space. Insofar as like I don't know, you don't deny me of like my pronouns, how I want to like identify my gender and everything like that. Then they just said like their friend Saratoga lost to it. Like okay, I don't really know what that matters. We say they have to lose to it in order to shape their behavior. They're the ones who have to lose now that like we ran the interp on them. Now they just say it's abusive to small schools. We say theory exists to like, I don't know, check back on abuse within the debate space. It's not abusive at all. Like we're a small school ourselves. We don't have that many teams. We don't really have a coach. Like this is the entire reason why we're reading like the interp is to promote trigger warnings are bad, not real world. Women and queer folk do not get trigger warnings before they are cackled on the street or subjected to violence. Trigger warnings deal in the experiences of victims by making it seem. Did someone say stop?
Yeah, there's a full freeze up there.
Okay, then I'll just start from like 50 seconds if that's okay.
Yeah, that should be fine. That should be about right.
Okay. Now, on the trigger warning theory, trigger warnings are bad and not real world. Women and queer folk do not get trigger warnings before they're cackled on the street or subjected to violence. Trigger warnings delegitimize the experiences of victims by making it seem like everything is better if you just read a warning. It's not. The people who are being human trafficked did not get a trigger warning. We will not falsely portray their narratives by reading one. We don't commodify their stories or use trauma porn. Forcing people to use a trigger warning to talk about human trafficking as a concept creates a stigma that prevents actual policy discourse from being generated because no one feels comfortable talking about it when you like if they just like yeah. But anyways, onto the interp. This is the most important thing to today's round. I don't even care about case anymore. You have to drop the debater to promote inclusion within the debate space. This is a live round. People are going to see this round. People are going to start abiding by like what we put in this round and start promoting inclusion. So I myself don't have to feel like my gender is being discriminated against. So I myself don't feel like in order to succeed, I have to identify as a male.
Can we see the answers to trigger warning theory?
Yeah. We're gonna send it right now. Okay, it's gonna be an email chain. The text is kind of weird, but I'm still sending it.
Was it sent?
Yeah, it was sent.
Subash. Or wait, yeah, we're gonna run some prep time starting now.
Are you also running prep? I'm pretty sure that's close to time.
Yeah, we're out of prep. We're out of prep.
We are. So I'm gonna start off on our off and then their off.
Okay, sounds good.
Here, one sec. Let me. Okay. Let's start on our off. A's interpretation. Before starting a speech, debaters must verbally disclose if their speech discusses non-graphic or graphic, potentially triggering subject matter such as sexual assault, other triggering material they read, as well as offer to alter their speeches according to the request of their opponents or judges. To clarify, read trigger warnings. But they violated by not doing so. The C standards. Our sole standard is safety. Trigger warnings keeps survivors safe. Trigger warnings help survivors reduce distress, memories of trauma, or more distressing without any warning than if the survivor intentionally thinks about their trauma. Unprompted triggering information can cause panic attacks, difficulty sleeping, and more. Trigger warnings respect that people must deal with their trauma when they're ready. It is up to the survivor to decide when they're ready. Safety is an independent voter, which outweighs all other concerns in the round, because actions that harm the safety of this event, vulnerable individuals push people out of debate and erode its activity. Safety is also the strongest internal link to fairness, because if debaters do not feel safe and around, they cannot debate without, which is definitionally unfair, as well as that destroys the educational benefits of the round. themselves tell you, say you guys too, so you can't really isolate that. But then we are telling you to like, it's a safer society. If you were to have trigger warnings, you're always going to be preferring trigger warnings over there. Then D, voters. Education is a voter because it's the only portable skill from debate. Fairness is a voter because we can seek fair education of our arguments when we make them. Drop the debater, 2 justifications. 1, wins and losses determine the direction of this event. Then losing to the shell tells them and others to read trigger warnings in PF. Second, once a safety of a round has been jeopardized, it cannot be undone. But then let's go on to their responses. They tell you that we're commodifying the event. 2 responses. First, this doesn't make any sense. It's not a commodification to a point. One that abuses needs to be punished. But then second, voting for this shell solves back for itself in the long term, because once everyone reads trigger warnings, nobody will have to read the show anymore. But then next, they tell you we're delegitimizing. It's quite arbitrary what I perceive as graphic. If people have developed PTSD or trauma as a result of the impacts of things like trafficking, then they are undermining victims. Then let's go on to their shell. They literally said, you guys too, you should prioritize this as it precludes all discourse impacts. It lets debate, let's make debate a safer space for everyone to actually set norms about language and things of that sort. If we win a small risk of the shell, it comparatively comes out to like before any other theory arguments. Telling non-native speakers to learn English because their mom can do it also is also really like messed up. It's another reason to drop the debater, because they're making it very exclusive for like a one type of like language speaker to like be able to like succeed in debate. I myself like know only like Telugu as like my first language, so I really do not know like how to like speak properly. And as you can see, I've been stuttering a lot through the speech, so I obviously make a lot of like speaking mistakes. There's not like, there should be a reason to like drop a debater because of that. But then it's not like, it's not my native language, and we're like, you don't drop us for things that are like inherent to our native culture. Like I shouldn't be dropped because I like speak Telugu as my first language. Like it doesn't make sense. But that's time.
So y'all ready for grand?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So on this whole thing about, I don't know, not being like your native language and everything, right?
Yeah.
So I completely understand, like my mom didn't speak English or anything too. I completely understand that. But insofar as like, if you lose now and that commodifies behavior within the future, wouldn't that mean like you're still more likely to stop using gender discriminatory language like against non-binary folks like myself? Doesn't like it still apply? Like if you lose this round, then you are much more careful in the future to not use gender discriminatory.
I would say it's probably the opposite is to be true. A lot of people are going to see the shell as a reason as to like why they're losing grounds or something, and they'll probably think that.
Wait, but you can't have the shell ran on you if you don't violate the standards of the shell.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay, cool. So do y'all have a question?
No, you guys can take another one.
Okay, cool. So why didn't y'all read the trigger warning theory in case, since y'all were second?
What?
Why didn't y'all read the trigger warning theory?
As we've said before, we're from a small school. This is our first theory round. We don't really know like the intricacies behind theory. So we thought reading it in rebuttal was a smart idea, considering that it will respond to y'all's case.
Okay. Yeah,
after y'all read theory against us.
I mean, like, we're unfamiliar with how theory works. So, I mean, we thought it was smart to just read in rebuttal instead.
Okay, cool.
Can I have a question?
Yeah, you go ahead.
So let's talk about safety, which doesn't go responded in today's round. So do y'all think that safety comes first?
We sent the trigger warning response to you via the email chain. Like we did respond to the trigger warning theory. Like if you want, like I can read it again.
We frontlined the responses. So.
What's up?
Yeah.
We frontlined the responses.
Yeah.
Wait, not really, right? Because the argument that we are making that, well, y'all don't really like respond to the language is that we say gendered language is going to outweigh. B, we would say that the discourse that we brought into the round is going to outweigh, because that means that theory in PF works, and it's something that we
like. Wouldn't you agree that
y'all question our ethics, which is good, and we say that like without discourse and without these kind of arguments being ran, then that never happened.
Wait, hold on. Like, wouldn't you agree that like if you don't read a trigger warning, right, and then you you bring up
Well,
like
but-
bad experiences for a survivor, isn't that going to do more subconsciously to a person than someone calling or like than someone not calling them like by their preferred
Oh,
pronoun?
no. Well, maybe, but it depends on the specific circumstance, A. B,
Like what
you
circumstance?
say them is, okay,
Because like
well,
we give you the examples from the standards that when you
right.
like the trigger warning or like when the trigger warning goes
Okay.
like disregarded, that it
Oh.
like can cause PTSD. It can literally keep people up at nights, and it can literally harm their mental well-beings and everything. Like I agree that if
Okay.
someone misgenders you, that is pretty bad thing, and it could probably also be pretty harmful to that person.
Yeah. Okay.
Ready?
Yeah. All right. So the order is just going to be like our insert blank. Okay. Is everybody ready? Cool. Extend our interpretation. We say that this is going to be the most important voter in the round insofar as we impact out to two specific impacts that go dropped. First is discourse. This impact outweighs anything that they can say because we make the analysis that without discourse and without these type of arguments being ran, you're never going to see any arguments or any ethics within the debate round be checked back on. For instance, because we ran this interp in the first place, they then read like a counter interp. We say that that's healthy for public forum because it's not like a common argument. We're the ones who brought discourse into the round. We say that also that this is going to independently outweigh their case, as we say that they weren't like specifically violated within this round because of the trigger warning. B, we never actually violated because they said we have to like describe descriptive things. We never like described anything descriptive. We just said that like this is what the United States is doing, and that's inherently bad. We didn't necessarily violate their interpretation. Even then, though, we can extend the counter interpret, which is like trigger warnings are bad and not real world. Like women and queer folks do not get trigger warnings before they are catcalled on the street and like subjected to violence, which is why we say that it's like not real world. This just undermines education. We would say that like education outweighs fairness because fairness is subjective because people have different conceptions as to what like the practices of fair is, and like competing interpretations don't solve because other people have different conceptions about what constitutes fairness in general. Like on top of that, we would say that like at the end of it, like on this language barrier thing, where you're like, we would say that it's like a lot easier to do it for us. For instance, since they violated at the first beginning of the round, since then they haven't violated again. That shows that they're perfectly able to not violate. It's just they didn't think about it that much after they like did, unless like they lose truth themselves, they're not going to think about it that much. For instance, we know teams that have lost to the round, such as VIP, J.D.L, and they like since haven't violated the interp again, or at least in the last one where we watched them, they haven't violated. We say that this is healthy for debate, and it's the only way you're going to stop people from violating in the future. At the end of the day, we would say that the ballot is pretty clear for us. A, like in-round abuse, we would say that it's going to be like outlaying insofar as like they don't respond to the analysis, which is that education outweighs fairness. But then B, we would say that, like insofar as like this is just like proving discourse to be successful now, like the voter discourse is going to independently outweigh any of the things that they can talk about. If we say that public forum is exclusionary in of itself, the only way you're going to allow for more like checks on ethics is through running these kinds of arguments and voting them up.
It's gonna start on our theory and then theirs. Is everyone ready? Yeah. Okay, cool. On our shell, again, they've conceded to pretty much everything. They don't read a counter interp or anything like that for that matter. Ultimately, what we're going to tell you is that if debaters don't read a trigger warning, that's pretty bad. They concede to the standard of safety. This is really important because the evidence that we read to you indicates that whenever a person who is a survivor does not get a trigger warning read on them, then that's ultimately going to trigger really, really bad experiences like PTSD, trauma. It's going to keep people up at night. It's going to prevent them from eating. It's going to like spur lots of sort of mental disorders, and it's going to be really, really harmful for these people. The weighing that they drop is the most important thing because they don't respond to the analysis that we have made since rebuttal. That ultimately, when people are not being, or like when a trigger warning is not read on a person, it's going to do a lot more to them than it would if someone misgenders them. We agree that misgendering people is also a pretty bad thing, but it's not going to harm someone to the extent that they want to kill themselves because they're reliving such a traumatic experience. We would tell you that this theory is going to be the most important thing in the round. They say that you need to vote for education and fairness and things like that. We're linking into that too, because we tell you that if you drop them for not reading this, then you're going to spread education that people should be reading. People should like use trigger warnings more often to prevent like people from like bringing up these experiences ever again and potentially being really harmful to someone. they try to say that trigger warnings don't really work. Remember, they concede to the evidence that we also read, like in summary, that says the point is not to dial down trauma, but it's just by warning people that are now for individuals who will be negatively affected by the content in order to just simply preserve their mental health. They say their argument wasn't descriptive. First, this is a new response in their final focus, but second of all, it's quite arbitrary to say what someone would perceive as graphic. If people have developed PTSD as trauma as a result of the impacts of things like trafficking, and they're just undermining those victims as well. This is going to outweigh literally everything in the round, because again, remember, you're literally harming the mental, like you literally like risk mental or harming the mental well-being of these individuals. That's going to do a lot more than it would just accidentally misgender someone, specifically on their off. Remember, we would tell you that this is a very subconscious thing. You can't punish someone just because it's not in their nature, right? Like again, Subhash is just an ESL speaker. By them just trying to tell them like that he should be able to watch out for saying you guys just because their mom can, that's literally bad. Like that's just a huge criticizing remark. But in any case, remember, they literally said you guys themselves without having any sort of regard. We definitely care about our interp a lot more than they do.
That's time. All right.
Hey everyone, this is Tab. Is flight 1 over?
Just about to give a decision right now. So should only take about
Okay.
30 seconds to give a decision here. We had a few technical things.
Okay, yeah, if you can keep it within 30 seconds, that'd be awesome because we got to get flight 2 started. Thanks.
Yep. Okay, so this round ends up being kind of frustrating to evaluate because I don't really feel like I think that both sides need to be doing a better job of impacting things out and impacting out their arguments to the point that I really kind of feel like ultimately the shells are borderline on a like toss up by the end of the round. So I end up having to look to who has a cleaner and clearer explanation throughout the round in terms of impacting. I ultimately feel like the AF has a much better job in terms of impacting and explaining the education outweighing fairness thing. Because I'm really not clear on the specifics of the violation on the trigger warning shell. I think you need to be pointing out more specific language in the affirmative case that would have been triggering or would have been problematic. And I think that would have been a much better route to go. So I end up voting AF in this round. I think that both sides probably could work on their theory debate a little bit though, if they're going to run this again. So cool.
you.
Yep. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Oh, you left already.
All right, good round.
And just so y'all know,
No, yeah, it's cool.
I don't know. Yeah, y'all. Thank you for being like good sports.
Yeah, we apologize if we did anything like.
No. Yeah, I know. Thank y'all so much for that.
Yeah.
Some teams don't. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, see y'all.
Okay, thanks. We're gonna take over now. I appreciate it. Have a good day. Okay, do I have everybody here for flight 2?
Yes, both Blake.
Hey,
Okay.
this is Tab. If everyone's just hit start, please.
Yep, I already did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have Blake on the pro and Westridge on the con. Blake speaking first.
We're ready whenever.
I'm good.
All right. Cool. Ale, you're not yet on the screen. You good? Can you give me
Yeah, I
one
forgot to start my
second?
video.
Sorry.
Sorry, Blake, are you good?
Yeah, I'm good. Sorry, someone just walked in. Okay.
Elisandro, are you good?
I'm good.
Okay. So Blake on the AF speaking first. Is anyone not ready? All right. We affirm contention 1 is drones. The U.S. needs bases in the Persian Gulf to fly its drones throughout the Middle East, as Whitlock 14 finds. The U.S. military is relying on bases in the Persian Gulf to carry out airstrikes. The Pentagon has become increasingly dependent on the tiny Gulf states to host the bulk of its forces in the Middle East. The Persian Gulf bases are required for refueling and rearming, as Rochester 17 finds. The U.S. bases in the Gulf have been essential to American operations. American planes use the Gulf to refit, rearm, and deploy. The U.S.'s use of drones has 2 impacts. The first is civilians. The Obama administration killed hundreds of civilians with drone strikes, Harpootlian and 20 fines. That Obama had authorized 528 strikes with a death toll reaching somewhere between 380 and 801 civilians in Libya, Pakistan, Somalia, and Yemen alone. In fact, structural factors mean the deaths are much higher than figures say. Boyle 13 finds that it is nearly impossible to verify the numbers of civilians killed in a drone strike. Most of these drone strikes are concentrated in ungoverned spaces. Government and intelligence officials in both the US and targeted states often assert without evidence that all those killed were either militants or civilians. The tally of civilian deaths are much higher. The situation is worsening under Trump as Harpootlian and 20 continues that Trump began to quietly dismantle the safeguards Obama had created. Drone strikes across the greater Middle East rise and a lot more civilians start dying from them. Drone strikes destroy the social fabric of places they strike, as Boyle 13 finds. The drones spread fear and suspicion throughout society. Innocent villagers are equally terrified of being in the wrong place at the wrong time when an attack occurs. Drones produce among civilian populations a wave of terror. Drones have inhibited normal economic and social activities and even made parents reluctant to send their children to school. Drones circling overhead spread fear that underlies much of religious, economic, and political life in these societies. The second impact is state collapse. Drone attacks systematically undermine governments and increase the probability of state failure. Boyle 13 finds that drone attacks have lasting political effects that can weaken governments, undermine their legitimacy, and add to the ranks of their enemies. The popular perception that a government is powerless to stop drone attacks on its territory can embolden its domestic rivals to challenge it through violence. State failure spills over and creates massive conflict. As Farron 15 says, that state collapse and failure raises the risk of civil wars and state failures in a region that is important for regional and international stability. Refugee strains on neighboring states' economies and political balances, regional conflict over failed states, increased militarization, support for insurgents, and risks of regional interstate military conflict. Contention 2 is stopping conflict. The U.S.'s role in the Middle East as a security guarantee destroys effective alliances. Ashford 18 finds American predominance in the region prevents states from balancing in the face of threats as they would do in the absence of U.S. presence. As long as the U.S. continues to act as a regional security guarantee, ideological factors will continue to inhibit alliances. The lack of these alliances has meant Iran's expansionism goes effectively unchecked. Gazan 17 finds the failure of other local powers to form effective blocking or balancing alliances against Iran, the state that has most clearly improved its regional position. Diplomacy and politics are preferable. As Jones 11 finds, the challenge of how to deal with Iranian ambition is mainly a political problem, one that for too long has been treated almost entirely through the lens of security and militarism. The impact is ending the Yemen war. As U.S. withdrawal signals have forced diplomacy in Yemen, Parsi 20 finds that recognizing U.S. military was no longer at their disposal, Saudi Arabia and the UAE began exercising the diplomatic options. Saudi Arabia stepped up direct talks with Houthi rebels in Yemen as a way to ease tensions. The level of violence on both sides declined as a result. An 80% reduction in Saudi-led airstrikes, and there were no Yemeni deaths in the previous 2 weeks. Tehran floated a peace plan based on mutual Iranian-Saudi pledge of non-aggression. The Yemen war is a catastrophe, as Bachman and 18 finds that more than 22 million people are in need of humanitarian aid and protection. 18 million people lack reliable access to food. Thus, we affirm. Oh shoot, we forgot to start the email chain. Is it cool if we do that now?
Oh, yeah. If you need any cards and stuff, we can.
Yeah.
Blake, since you're first speaker, can you start that chain for us?
Yes, I will do that for sure. All right. Okay, for some really strange reason, it won't let me copy anything off the chat, so I'm gonna just handwrite it, I guess. So sorry, it's gonna take me a minute.
We can say our emails out loud if you need, because they are like a long string of numbers.
It's okay, I'll make a split screen. Thank you.
Gotcha.
Okay, I sent it out. Please let me know if you're not on it because I probably misspelled it.
I just got it, so we are ready to rumble.
I'm good too. Whenever you're
Karen, I conflict. Lenoska in 2016 explains that ground troops in allied countries are the most effective way the United States makes itself look like a willing partner. Troops symbolize that the U.S. has commitment by acting as a tripwire and ability by being effective in combat. 10,000 troops in Qatar prevented the Saudi invasion. However, DUAC in 2015 warns that a smaller force and limited capabilities precedes the outbreak of war, making alliances and adversaries take more risk. In fact, renewed aggression would devastate the region. First, because Iran becomes more aggressive. Birchfield of Georgetown Security Studies in 2019 explains that Iranian security policy is both ideological and in order to protect its influence and national security, especially through its proxies like Hezbollah or Shia militias. Iranian expansion abroad forces engagement because involvement in foreign wars gives them a seat at the negotiating table. Even under crushing sanctions, Area 19 of Foreign Policy explains that Iran still maintains robust support for proxy groups because military aspects like training, safe havens, and transfers of weapons and technology don't stop under sanctions. Already, Iran is slowly reaching its goal of establishing a land bridge of proxy organizations aimed at creating instability everywhere. And War 20 warns that when the US reduced military presence, Iran capitalized on it. For example, a troop reduction in Afghanistan meant that Iranian proxies expanded there and into Yemen. The second is that Saudi Arabia lashes out. Sunni writes that while Saudi Arabia is the ultimate status quo power, Iran challenges their legitimacy by showing an alternative elected Islamic republic. Any gain by Iran is then pushed back on by Saudi Arabia. That's why Pollock of Brookings in 2016 explains because Saudi perceives Iran as destroying their stability, their strategy is to lash out and beat back threats to regional control. For example, the Saudis see Yemen as an Iranian bid to stealthily undermine the kingdom from its southern border. He concludes that Saudis are going to keep taking whatever actions they feel necessary to defeat what they perceive as Iranian efforts to undermine their external power and internal stability. Is threatened when the US leaves. Luck 18 explains that if the United States security relationship disintegrates, the public will turn on MBS, arguing that he is chipping away at their stability. Tabatabai in 2018 corroborates that MBS requires the US's support to maintain his legacy and power. Concerningly, Al-Rashid in 2018 warns that MBS's anti-Iranian rhetoric and resistance to their influence throughout the Middle East is aimed at creating a warlike situation in which internal dissent is silenced, reminding the public that he is fighting the existential threat of an expansionist Iran. The Saudi ideology has thus become militarized nationalism, feeding off of the threat of Iran. But this power struggle is devastating. Welshler in 2019 explains that more regional aggression will be bad news for the Middle East because leaders now are building up their own capabilities. Problematically, new capabilities typically outpace the wisdom with which they are employed. The combination of new capabilities and new leadership increases misuse and escalation, meaning small confrontation can quickly become full-time conflict. In fact, Crosby in 2019 of Foreign Policy writes that eliminating US dominance would severely upend the balance of power, leading to the long-term regional war between Tehran and an anti-Iranian coalition composed of Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states. This war would play out in three different ways. The first is proxies. Gauss in 2014 explains that conflict between Iran and Saudi Arabia often plays out as proxy wars in the region's weak states as they look to external allies along sectarian lines. But encouraging conflicts within weak states would be devastating for local populations. As Gov 17 quantifies that for every direct death from a Middle East civil war, there are 4 indirect ones from lack of clean water or disease, already slaughtering 1.5 million people. The second is great power war. Concerningly, Hunter in 2016 writes the US must restrain the Saudis in their vendetta against Iran because a new Middle East war against Iran would likely spread and involve China and Russia risking great power conflict. And the third is nuclear. Hanna in 2013 furthers that a Saudi-Iran standoff could quickly go nuclear because, as Lenoska in 2014 explains, US allies are more likely to engage in nuclear behavior when they doubt the reliability of the security guarantees, specifically conventional military deployments. Lenoska finds statistically that the United States allies are more likely to exhibit nuclear behavior in response to reductions of US troop deployments. Tragically, War to Vox reports that US military projections estimate tens of millions dead in nuclear confrontation.
Could we get speech doc because you were cutting out a couple of times?
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's fine.
Is there like any specific thing that you missed?
I was sort of like the first minute or two was.
Yeah, like everything up until the like link Iran becoming more aggressive was a little bit.
Okay.
I got you. I can send those. Those are just 3 cards up till like Iran becomes more aggressive.
And then I
You want
think
this?
the start of Saudi Arabia was a little bit out.
Okay, I got you.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, I just sent it.
I'll let you know when I get it. Do you want me to take prep when I look through it, or?
Sure. Or just read it because you missed it. Oh yeah, I'm tripping. Yeah.
Yeah,
Also,
that's fine.
oh, take time. It's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what?
Cross.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Sounds good. All right. Can I have the first question?
Mhm.
Okay. Thanks. So your link on Saudi Arabia is reliant on it having some sort of security guarantee where it feels safe from Iran, or Iran's ambitions like decreasing, right?
Well, so the first part is talking about Iran's ambitions. What we say is that it's more that they feel secure as a result of the US's presence being there in response to Iran.
Yeah, my question is like, if Iran is no longer like that much of a threat to Saudi Arabia, does that also take out your second link of Saudi Arabia acting?
I mean, like in order for Iran to not be a threat to Saudi Arabia, it basically have to not exist anymore because they see it as such an existential threat.
Right. Cool.
Okay. So you talk about this like idea of creating diplomacy within the Gulf. Build that kind of diplomacy.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the first part of your question.
Sorry. Okay, so you talk about like this idea of diplomacy within the Gulf, right? How long would that take?
How long would it take to build diplomacy? I mean, we would say almost immediately. They start forming alliances, they start forming bonds, they react to the US leaving and form the relationships that they should have in the absence of US presence, as our card says. Can I ask a question?
But don't alliances like rely on the fact that they're negotiating and talking to each other? Like it's not immediate, right?
I mean, an alliance doesn't really rely on much, and then except like forming an alliance with someone else. Like it doesn't take that much if they have to put aside all ideological factors because now they feel the need for alliances without the US, or they feel that they would be better off with alliances, as the counterbalancing argument would say. Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So let's talk about the Great Power War, right? You say that you say that China and Russia would get drawn in, and that's why the US wouldn't want a Great Power War, right?
I mean, we would say that, yeah, we generally want to avoid a Great Power War. But if you trigger a war in the Middle East regardless, then they're all going to get drawn back in.
Yeah, but would these great powers be drawn in by Iran and Saudi Arabia, or would they be drawn in by the US joining the war?
They'd be drawn in by Iran and Saudi Arabia.
Okay, and then we just assume the US would follow as the scenario?
I mean, so China and Russia don't have to be within this war in order for the US to come back, right? A large reason why Saudi Arabia might lash out is in order to get the US presence back, because if the US perceives that there becomes this larger threat, that's where we see them intervening again, like when we see like all US intervention.
Oh, so Saudi Arabia strikes first?
Probably.
All right, you can, I mean, I guess it's 2 seconds or 8 seconds.
I have a really quick question. Did the negotiations in Yemen work?
Yeah, until the US came back into the region, and that's why we saw no deaths for 2 weeks, and then the US became involved in the region.
When did the US leave and come back?
The US showed and said that they weren't going to go to war. They showed that they had the intent to pull out, and then they came and killed one of Iran's like big officials, and that's why we went back to war, because the US came back into the region.
I'm going to take some prep time starting now. That was 27 seconds by my count. This was 2:33. Oh, sorry, 2:23. No, 2:33. All right, I can do math. It's just going to be an overview, then down their case. Is everyone ready?
Yep.
Cool. Start with an overview. If their argument were true that if the US withdrew, we would see huge cycles of instability, we should have seen it in the past. However, a empirical study finds that US presence in the Gulf actually increases the intensity of conflict. What Lily 18 finds that the data shows no trend towards a decrease in the intensity of armed conflict. On the contrary, the percentage of war was lower in the period of absence than it was in the period of exceptionally heavy presence. Lily concludes that the US could afford to scale back their military presence without compromising the region's stability. This is better than all of their evidence because it's actually a study of what the US presence has historically done. But even then, at the top, let's do some weighing. First, our drones argument is going to outweigh for 3 reasons. The first is probability, because you literally know the US is currently killing civilians with drones, and you know that the US withdrawal would solve the problem. However, you have no idea if every single geopolitical factor would align the way they want it to. But second is on reversibility, because the civilians who get killed by drones, literally no one knows they even exist. They're discounted by all official government counts, whereas every single country in the world is trying to stop a huge Middle Eastern great power world. But third is a prereq, because state collapse means that there's huge spillover of violence and instability throughout the region, which magnifies all of their impacts. But then our connection too is also in a prerequisite argument through alliances. We would say the only reason why their argument would be true is if either Saudi Arabia gets really scared of Iran or Iran gets really scared. However, what we feel like through our alliances link is that instead Saudi Arabia is just able to balance Iran by creating more alliances within the Gulf, which solves all the issues they talk about. On their first link about Iran, you can turn a U.S. Gulf presence only increases militarization with Iran. Jones 11 finds Iran does not seek to overthrow the Arab world's political order. Surrounding Iran militarily and putting under the constant threat of American military action has failed to deter the country. Instead, it has emboldened hardliners within Tehran and convinced them that the best path to self-preservation is through defiance, militarism, and the pursuit of dangerous tides. But second, if their argument were true and we started a withdrawal in October, we should have seen Iran make a huge expansion throughout the Middle East. However, our party evidence concludes that Tehran started to float a peace plan of mutual non-aggression with Saudi Arabia. This is empirical evidence that is much better than all theirs because it postdates all of it. Then let's go. Then third, the Gauss evidence we read you in case indicates that our containment of Iran and status quo fails because we don't have any alliance, which means that if you want to contain Iran, you're always going to vote for us. On the second link about Saudi lash out, turn a U.S. military support for Saudi Arabia is the reason why they are so aggressive. Hasbun 19 finds that while aligned with the U.S. and benefiting with the U.S. security umbrella anchored based on the Gulf, Saudi Arabia have attempted to organize the region through aggressive financial support for allied regimes with proxies. However, second, the Parsi evidence we read you in case concludes that U.S. withdrawal solves all of these issues, which is why Saudi Arabia, when we started to see a U.S. withdrawal, actually floated peace plans within Yemen and with Iran holistically, which means you actually turn their impacts about regional war. But then on their argument, which is sort of floating about MBS like being overthrown, a couple of problems. First of all, it's too late to take MBS out of power. He's already sidelined all of his opposition. Luck 18, their very own author, says that he has removed so many of his critics and he has intimidated the population so much that his regime seems to be rather bulletproof right now. But second, you can actually turn a U.S. presence increases the probability of unrest in Saudi Arabia, and citing religious conservatives. Ashford 18 explains that in the case of Saudi civil strife, so a substantial U.S. military presence is more likely to incite domestic unrest among the religious conservatives than it is to prevent it. We would say that if the U.S. is stuck there forever, people are going to get upset about it. But then third, there's no reason why these squabbles that their evidence is talked about in the royal palace immediately lead to civil war. Even if there's a coup, it doesn't necessarily have to be violent. On the second argument of impact of a great power war, you can actually turn a U.S. military presence in the Persian Gulf actually leads to an inevitable cycle of escalation. Ostafar 20 finds the U.S. response fits right into the aims of Iran. They have more Iraqi deaths and destruction to fuel their effort to expel U.S. bases from the country. The cycle of escalation will continue towards certain conflict, which means you should do something about it. But second, the Jones evidence I read you earlier turns this, but it indicates that Iran demilitarized when you vote for us. On the third argument about a nuclear crisis, first you can turn it. U.S. presence is what makes Iran more likely to go nuclear. Shapiro and Sokolsky 16 find that Iran's main incentive to acquire nuclear weapons to deter U.S. conventional attacks to the extent of the lower military presence in the region diminishes those fears. Iran will be less likely to be nuclear. But second, we always have a ton of literature in Saudi Arabia, whether it be diversification of the economy, which they need our professionals, or the arms sales we sell them, which is why we're always going to be able to stop Saudi prolif. But the only thing we can stop is Iran prolif, and you do that by voting for us.
Ooh. Can you send us the U.S.'s inevitable cycle of escalation card and the one that you like read on top, the overview thing?
Yeah,
U.S. presence increases conflict.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, it just sent. So.
I'll let you know when I got it. I got it. Okay, let me start time. Okay. Okay. That was 24 seconds. We'll make it 25 seconds. I can't do math. Okay. I'm gonna take some more bread. Okay, so I've used a minute total so far. Come on, Zoom. Come on. There we go. One second. Okay. Everyone good? Okay. Start on the overview. All the evidence talks about pre-1979. This all changes when the Iranian Revolution happened. Of course, it got a lot more aggressive because Iran got a lot more aggressive. That's not causal at all. Then on their drone overview, this simply doesn't make any sense because we're a prerequisite. If we have a war, then we're going to be using more drone strikes. The weighing just doesn't work here, and I'll get to that when I respond to their contention. Then on the Iran, they read a couple of things. First, they say that Iranian, like, it increases the military, it increases the hardliners. What we're saying is if they're like so anti-US, they're going to take advantage and expand the power. They never concede. They concede the fact that Iran is expansionary. That's when they drop our birch field evidence. That's really important because we're saying Iran gets bigger. Their turns aren't responsive at all. But then they say we have a withdrawal in October. That's simply not true because instead Reuters writes that we increased our troops by 3,000 in October 13th of 2019. Yeah, so that doesn't make any sense. Go down to Saudi. First, they say that Saudi's going to create alliances. This is completely asserted and doesn't take into account Saudi's incentive structure. I'll get to that when I respond to their case. But then second, they say like we're going to turn it like why Saudi is so aggressive now. But we would say that they don't like they concede the fact that Saudi likes United States troops. So that implies that Saudi is going to get more aggressive to get United States troops back. That's a DH of their case. But then they say they're going to like turn it again because like Saudi's going to have this peace plan. This peace plan's impact is super nebulous and not contextualized. We would say this doesn't take into account Saudi's incentive structure. Then they like say it's like first on Saudi, like they say like the US is increasing conservatives and like, but like this isn't really responsive because we're saying it's MBS's feeling of like instability when the US pulls out because he feels like he doesn't have a defense backing. That's when we get full access to our links. They don't contest the fact when MBS is scared, he lashes out more. So now we have two scenarios to get to our war. Then they say like on the great powers war, like US is inevitable cycle of escalation. We would say if like the US pulls out and then has to come back in, that escalation will get far worse. So we outweigh, but then also the US is there calming people down. So that's going to make a lot less escalation. Then they read their Jones card. I'll get to that when I respond to case on nuclearization. They talk about Iran. That's not responsive. We're talking about Saudi Arabia nuclearizing specifically when the United States leaves. None of their responses are responsive. On the top, generally on like their case or the bottom of, yeah, no, throw this on the bottom of our case. First, we went on time frame. A, they don't contest how fast our war would happen. It's far faster than any of their impacts. Empirically, when the US pulled out of Syria, Turkey invaded just 3 days later. And B, because when our war happens faster, like than their diplomacy impacts, we call all the ground on their case because the US is going to come back into the region to defend their case, their allies in case of a Saudi-Iran war. 4 reasons. First, according to the US trade statistics, in US invested $11 billion in Saudi with private companies and oil drills. The amount invested means we're going to come back. back. But 2, in 1951, Saudi and the US signed a mutual defense assistance agreement. 3, Trump and MBS are really close because the week says that Trump is the most deferent ever. And 4, Trump is super pro-Israel. So if Israel feels threatened, we're going to come back in. Prefer our time frame weighing. 1, policymakers wouldn't go to a war now to avoid potential future one. The implication is that short-term impacts tend to have more magnitude in decision-making calculations. We A, know way more about the situations now and can make better decisions, and B, the future could drastically change in ways we don't predict. Corona, but it's too late for them to say war is slow to break out. Tensions are high right now, and we get more ground on this because the New York Times writes in 2020 we have a contingency plan to deploy 120,000 troops in case of an Iran escalation. That's about 4 times the number of troops we have now, so we have way more troops causing way more bad impacts. We also want to link in the time frame because the plan is already drawn up and can be executed quickly. First, on drones, super non-unique. That's because DW writes that drones can fly 24 miles on average. We already have like bases in like Kazakhstan that don't go away. We can still fly into the region. But 2, link turn. Those strikes tend to be used against like ISIS and Iran when they get expansionary. When Iran expands more in our world, which they don't contest, we're going to be using more drone strikes. Then they talk about state failure. It's a bunch of rhetoric here. They don't give you a bright line. Then on alliances, first, they don't understand the incentive structure. Saudi needs a threat to unify against their population against. They drop that in case. That's why Saudi tries to divide up against people like the UAE and Qatar. They just assert that they're going to come back. But then Birchfield says that Iran likes proxies. So that means Iran is always going to expand. There's never going to be peace. But then we'd say they don't give you a time frame on diplomacy. She just asserts and cross. It happens really quickly. But there's no empirics for fast alliances. If there's no trust for 30 years, and like they can't go from like hating each other to like not attacking each other and having like mutual defense. That doesn't make any sense.
Okay, you good for cross?
Yeah.
Cool. Can I take first question?
Go for it.
All right, so let's talk about the threat to unify the Saudi population. Where in your luck evidence is to say that the Saudi people would turn against him?
It's so like the Saudi people, they're kind of like over here. Like if MBS feels like unstable and then threatened, he's like, oh no, I need to like assert control and like unify me and like my state and my people like against this one thing. So then that's when he takes the action, and it's kind of like a diversionary war kind of situation.
The question I asked though is, where does the luck evidence talk about the people turning against him? Because that's what you quoted as in case.
I mean, I can pull it up. I don't have my evidence memorized. We have multiple cases.
Is explicitly talking about like people within the royal family saying
yeah,
they're eroding our security. That is not the same thing as a widespread popular unrest that MBS has to quell in other ways.
But here's the thing though, the link still flows through because if MBS feels insecure, he lashes out. That's a fact that you never contest in rebuttal. Right. So insofar as like he loses US support, which is a thing that makes him feel more secure, then he's gonna lash out.
We do contest that fact, and like we can get into this later in the debate, but we do contest that fact for sure. You can take a question.
Okay, so does Iran want to expand?
No. The only reason why they want to expand is because of the US. The Jones evidence talks about the Iran's incentive structure is that Iran does not want to upset the Saudi political order. Our Jones evidence, the first line of it is explicit.
Wait, that doesn't make any sense with their actual actions.
Yeah, the reason why is because of 2 sentences down. The Jones evidence also explains the reason why they've been so expansionary, which accounts for your evidence, because your evidence is entirely Iran's expansionary. We agree with that. That's the reason why is because the US is so militarized within the region, they feel threatened enough that they are forced to lash out. Our argument accounts for your evidence, right? It says like, yeah, Iran's expansionary. We agree with that. The reason why they're expansionary is solely because of the US presence. And the reason why that's so important is because of the first line of Jones says that in the event, like when it's just about your era political order, they don't care about upsetting it. They really don't want to. Can I take a question?
Sure.
Cool. So let's talk about like, I guess, let's talk about like the US pulling out and then coming back in. So where are these troops, these 120,000 troops stationed?
I don't know. I didn't read the Pentagon plan. I just read they had one, probably in US bases, like US reserve bases.
No, but like, where would they go into in the event that we abandoned all of our bases? Like, what would they do? Like, if all our bases are gone, like, what are we gonna do?
I mean, like, you can't just destroy bases in one day, right? So, like, either AFFIAT means the bases magically leave, which is impractical, or AFFIAT means like we leave and the bases still stay there so we can come back into them, or AFFIAT means we destroy the bases completely and then leave, which doesn't give you a very good time frame.
It's not about destroying the bases, right? It's that someone else would probably want them. I think that would make sense, right? Like if we are entirely leaving,
I mean, like
it's not like they're gonna be like, oh, US, like come back in. Like doesn't seem like
okay, but if we're fighting a war on behalf of them, they probably want us there. But that's cross.
All right, cool.
1 second. I just gotta pull everything up. Ollie, do you wanna? Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna start my timer now. 1 sec. Sorry, I clicked stop video instead of mute. All right. It's gonna start on our case. 1 second. Okay, it's gonna start on our case. Is anyone not ready? Let's start on the cleanest place to vote in this round, and that is on drone strikes. What we tell you really cleanly with the Whitlock evidence is that we rely on our bases in the Persian Gulf in order to deploy our drones, refuel them, and rearm them. As so far as that's true, we have 2 impacts. The first is civilians, where Harputulin tells you that we've been increasing drone attacks, and the previous drone attacks have been killing over like 800 civilians, and that's not even all because these are grossly underestimated because they don't actually account for all the people that are dying. But the reason why this is critical is because it extends states of terror over all these civilians in the point where it harms their education, it stops people from going to school, it harms society's ability to function as a whole. But the second impact is on state collapse, where Boyle tells you that when you have drone attacks on civilians, that means that it weakens the government's legitimacy and increases the risk of domestic rivals. When you have state failure, that means that there's international instability in the area, meaning that military conflicts increase, refugees crises exacerbate economic situations. That so far as that is true, you are seeing severe wars and spillover happening. They put 2 responses. The first is drones can fly 24 miles. First of all, they don't prove that's far enough. But second, we say it's absolutely critical from our Roach's evidence that they're able to rearm and refuel. But second, we say that the air base in Qatar is actually the armed command center, meaning that's where they fly the bases from and that's how they control them. It's actually really crucial. But second, they say there's a term because they fight terror. First, it's extremely underwarranted. But second, we would say that it actually only increases anti-American sentiment if you're killing more civilians, meaning that there's going to be more terrorists in the future. But second, we would say that you kill way more civilians for each terrorist you kill. Therefore, it's not a very good method of solvency. Let's go to their case. Yeah. So let's start on the overview. First, what we tell you is they drop the second Lily card that tells you when the U.S. withdraws, you do not see a change in the like a bad change in the state of the Gulf. So you can disregard the first one so far as that's true. But second, let's go to their link on Iran. We would give you a few responses. The first is with the Jones evidence saying that Iran never has the incentive to expand without the U.S. being in the region. They have dropped their hegemonic like aspirations. And so far as Jones tells you that all they do is an existential threat against the U.S. having constant pressure on them in the region. So far as that is true, it's really crucial because Iran is not going to be aggressive when the U.S. leaves, meaning they have no solvency. But second, the Gaz evidence that tells you that when the U.S. leaves, that means that they're able to form allies to counteract Iran, meaning that there's Iran's never going to be a threat. They try to tell you that they try to tell you that our historical evidence about Parsi isn't true because they increased a bunch of troops the next day. We say that this evidence is about signaling. So historically, when we saw that they signaled they were going to pull out, we saw an increase in diplomacy. Second, on Saudi Arabia, the luck evidence tells you that MBS has consolidated power and silenced opponents. At this point, he's not going to be feeling insecure at all. Second, we tell you that there are alternate relationship guarantees such as economic ties. But third, Gauss tells you that they're just going to form allies anyway to counter. Let's go on to the weighing, which is really clean. First, on probability, we tell you that you know you're killing civilians right now. You have no idea if geopolitical factors are going to come into play. Second, on reversibility, no one is looking out for these civilians as so far as everyone has their eyes on a global war. They try to extend time frame, but drones has much better time frames. But Parsi also tells you that allies in the region happened right after the U.S. withdrew. This is a much better weighing mechanism than some shot in the dark for geopolitical factors to work out. Thus, we affirm.
All right, we're taking prep.
Hannah, do you want me to call you or are you vibing?
I think I'm good unless you have something to. You want to call me?
Yes. Okay. Wait, can you call me because you do not disturb on? That's annoying. Thanks.
That was a minute 30, so we have like 30 seconds left.
Also, Hannah, you like kind of cut out a lot
Okay.
in your constructive. So if you want to like go somewhere with better Wi-Fi, so we don't have to do
Yeah.
that again.
I
Turn
would
off
li-
your video.
I can. Are you all okay with me turning off my video if that improves the? Like, I promise it's still me. I'm not like.
I'm fine with it, but it's not up to me.
You know, I'm down for this speech. Just turn off your video. That's totally fine. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Just to make sure it doesn't cut out, and just let me know if it does still cut out.
We'll signal if there's anything.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to be doing. It's going to be weighing our case, their case.
And actually, real quick, can everyone turn off the video?
Everyone ready?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. They lose the round when they don't respond to the prereq analysis. So Kara tells you that if we pull out now, U.S. troops are going to be forced to go back in for a myriad of reasons. That's because they have the U.S. security guarantee. Trump is close with MBS. It's pro-Israel, and there's U.S. investment in the Gulf, which means that if you pull out and create the war that we tell you about, it's going to trigger all of their impacts because even greater amount of U.S. troops are going in, specifically 4 times as many troops. So that magnifies anything that they talk about. But then they don't respond to the meta-analysis where we tell you that you have to prefer immediate impacts first, because that's how policymakers make decisions. We don't know anything about the future. But second, because again, we're more informed about the situations that are happening right now, which means we're making poor decisions if we make assumptions about the future. But that's where you go to our case, where we tell you that we're clearly winning these rounds to the point that we both agree that Saudi Arabia is comforted by the U.S.'s presence in respect to the Iranian issue. Birchfield tells you that Iran wants to expand without the U.S. because of ideological issues, influence, and it gives them a seat at the negotiating table. That means even if you buy that Iran is threatened by the U.S.'s presence and that's why it's expanding, it's going to continue to expand because if the U.S. disappears from the Gulf, it still wants to have a seat at the table at the point that that expansion is a mechanism of their own national security. That's where Paul tells you that Saudi Arabia is always going to lash out when it feels insecure, and it's insecure because it's threatened by Iranian aggression or just Iranian presence in general at the point that there are those ideological and national security differences. And second, by this issue of the loss of U.S. support, because when they perceive this loss of U.S. support, they're immediately going to lash out, A, either to get it back, or B, to deter Iran. But that's where you have empirical evidence on our side to the point that U.S. military preventing invasion of Qatar by having troops in the area. At that point, they talk about this idea of allies. The problem is, we would say if you start a war immediately, these alliances are going to dissolve very quickly, to the point that they haven't been solidified in the long term. They can't just magically build the trust that an alliance requires. But then they talk about this issue of signaling. Again, the issue is that we increased troops and Iran did not become more aggressive. Instead, when we decrease troops, Iran becomes more aggressive. The problem is even if the U.S. has all sorts of rhetoric, the countries in the region know what's happening, and so they're not going to make decisions off of just U.S. rhetoric. That's where you go to their case. Again, both of their impacts are very, very nebulous to the point that one, we know that the drones can fly up to 24 miles, even if that doesn't cover all of drones and that one base is important. If the U.S. really wants to strike, it's going to find other ways to do that through other countries because we still have presence in other parts of the Middle East other than specifically those Gulf states. But second, the issue is that again, prereq, because if we go in and we create a war, then U.S. U.S. presence is going to significantly increase within the Gulf, and we're going to see a greater amount of drone strikes because it gives the U.S. an incentive to go in to a greater amount than what they're talking about. If we keep the amount of troops we have right now, it preserves peace. But when we take them out, even in the short term, it only leads to a spike in troops, which only creates more drone strikes and the things they talk about. Similarly, on the issue with conflict, they don't really give you a timeline for diplomacy. We would say that diplomacy takes a long time to the point that it's about building trust and that we can't necessarily know how it happens. The GCC exists now. They can't tell you how much more they're going to increase diplomacy and to what extent that's actually going to prevent the war at the point that you're immediately heightening tensions and immediately incentivizing Saudi to lash out. Did you get all of that?
Yes, I got it. We got all of it.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, it was a little fast. I was worried about.
All right, ready for Grand?
Yeah.
All right, can we have the first question? Okay, so the U.S. will be drawn into any regional war, right?
Yeah.
What are you getting at there?
Well, I mean, you said yes. I was just wondering.
What are you getting at there?
Yeah.
I was asking if the U.S. is drawn in any regional war. You said yes. Is that no longer true?
The answer is yes, but we know you're going to use that against us in some way, in some speech. Duh, it's debate. So I'm asking you because this is cross and this is now my question. What were you getting at there?
Here's my point. The dropped link into regional war on our case draws in the US. So at best scenario, your prereq is non-unique because you never respond to that, right? The only hope is to prevent war.
What link?
The dropped impact 2 on state collapse leading to instability in regional war.
Yeah.
Okay, but here's the thing though. To do that, you have to win more drone strikes. Drone strikes in the SQO are on the are getting states are going to collapse. we keep doing the drone strikes in some amount of time, the states are going to collapse.
We have to win our case. Like that's the
But
way.
all the answers have to be in a speech, and insofar as Harpootlian is conceded, tells you drone strikes are increasing right now, and their lethality is increasing, and Boyle's warranting is entirely conceded.
I don't think
But
you
what's the
extend
reason for that,
Harpootlian
though?
in
Like,
summary,
I
though.
do extend Harpootlian. That's the one that says 800 lives are lost and we're ramping now.
Oh yeah, no, I have 800. Yeah, sorry.
Right,
Yeah,
but
okay.
we've like ramped up drone strikes in the past. Like, what specifically? Like, how many drone strikes do we need in order to like
76.
create this?
How
like,
many
ultimate
units of
weapon?
Iranian aggression do we need to go to war? That's kind of like,
It's not
I mean,
really.
we tell you
wait.
No, we tell you that symbolically, the U.S. leaving is what triggers the war.
Can I have a question?
Which is there right now. How many more drone
no,
strikes?
because you told me that Saudi Arabia triggered the war. So like Iran has to aggress towards Saudi Arabia to some
Wait,
amount. for it
no,
to trigger war.
that's our whole
Iran
case.
is
That's
already.
yeah. Wait, but can I have a
Iran is
question?
already
Because we spent a long
aggressive.
time on this.
Can I ask a question?
We spent like half of cross.
But the last
please.
question was yours.
2/3.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Just real quick, one word. Who is the U.S. striking with their drones?
People in Afghanistan, people in Pakistan,
Well,
people
yeah, well, like who are they intending to strike? Sorry.
try to strike terrorists. They do a really terrible job at it.
They killed,
Besides
like,
from terrorists, who
they
else are
killed
they trying to strike?
28
They
civilians.
killed one general. That is true. Yeah, they did kill a general.
Okay, but like there are civilian casualties. That is a fact. But
Yes.
besides from terrorists, and besides from civilians, who are they trying to strike?
I mean,
I'm genuinely confused. Like they try to strike terrorist leaders, terrorists, or people who they perceive as terrorists.
I mean,
Like,
Ali answered your question, so we're
Yeah,
not quite
like-
sure
Okay.
what the secondary person we're talking about is. Can I ask a question now?
Sure.
All right. So you tell us we have horrible time frame, but you also tell us that people are dying right now from drones. How is your time frame better than right now?
So to win your link into, sorry. Blah, 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 blah.
I mean, I guess that's time, so we can just.
Okay. That's a final focus question then.
all right. I don't have prep, so we'll just go for it. It's gonna start on drones. Is everyone good?
Sorry, yes.
You vote on drones. Whitlock has conceded the U.S. needs a Persian Gulf bases to be able to operate its drones. Harpootlian is also unanswered. We tell you the drone strikes are going up right now. 800 people have already died from them, and Trump is ramping up strikes and taking out safeguards. The Boyle evidence tells you that it destroys the entire social fabric of the villages it strikes. And most importantly, the state collapse impact is entirely unanswered. It's where you're going to vote is round. The Boyle evidence tells you that it systematically undermines government's legitimacy, which causes more armed uprising and fear, and tells you that the state failure spreads and causes more regional war and more regional conflict. Do not let them read new answers in the second final book. It is way too late. At that point, they concede the time frame argument that drones are happening literally every single week. It's a lot more time frame than their argument, but they also concede the other weighing mechanisms. They concede first on probability that right now we're doing drone strikes. Right now people are dying from that. You don't know if all this geopolitics talk are going to play out the way that they exactly want them to. But second of all, they also concede the reversibility way, which is so important because you tell you that civilians are literally systematically excluded from the discussion in terms of drone strike deaths, which is why you want to vote for them before you vote for all of these silly war impacts. But then on the defense, they say that we're going to find a way to do it other ways. First of all, they do not specify another way. Second of all, they don't answer any of the front lines. First of all, we need an air command in the region to direct drones. And second of all, we need a ton of bases to be able to refuel them, which we still gain 100% access to our drones argument. Then they say that U.S. president is going to come back into the Gulf. Here's the thing. They have to win that there's going to be a war if that's going to happen. And they're never going to win a war thing because our probability weighing still tells you that war is much more likely than a drones argument. So they still vote for us even if you grant them the full extent of this response. Then they say that the diplomacy takes a long time. They concede partially that tells you that immediately when we started signaling a withdrawal that actually caused a lot more diplomacy in the immediately and didn't cause a war. On their case, they drop a bunch of defense. First, they drop the luck evidence shows you that MBS has already completely consolidated its power, which means this insecurity they talk about doesn't happen. There's no lash out. They don't let them answer this new. They also answer unanswered Lily. They drop Lily, which shows you that U.S. withdrawal wouldn't cause any macro effect because it's an empirical study referred of all their evidence. They also drop drones. The reason for Iran expansion is the U.S. They say they want to expand without the U.S. They don't have a warrant for this. Our evidence is that Iran does not want to expand because they really don't want to upset the political order, which is why we're going to win this round. They have terminal defense on both their arguments.
Okay, Hana, we have like 30 seconds of prep left, right?
30 seconds.
Okay, I'm gonna call you real quick.
30.
That was prep. Everybody ready to rumble? Okay. It's wherever you flowed the time frame weighing / reintervention. Oops, I need a timer. Okay. They don't respond to the time frame meta weighing, and it's not looking good for them. We tell you our war happens really clean, and we give you empirics to that. Han extends that in summary, and what's really important is insofar as there's a war, all of their offense gets killed because the US comes back, and they actually come back with 4 times as many troops. This also gets a lot faster too, because we have plans going in. They never contest A, the speed of our war, or B, the fact it's gonna happen. They just read a bunch of non-responsive defense. But instead, because they concede the time frame meta weighing, they're locked into that one form of weighing, so don't buy any of their other like weighing mechanisms. On our case, it's a really clean ballot for us. The only 2 pieces of they only extend a few pieces of defense first, and the fact that MBS is consolidating, that's not responsive to our warrant. Our warrant says that Saudi Arabia feels systematically threatened by Iran. That's the Pollock pieces of evidence that Hana extends in summary. They feel like they're going to beat back threats to their external stability. Then we're also winning Iranian expansion. That's from the Birchfield evidence from Georgetown that says that Iran wants a seat at the table and they want to have regional influence. So insofar as the United States leaves, they're going to expand into more countries. So they're going to be included at like the seats at the table because they're in war and they need to be argued with. This gets completely dropped. But then our war link is the most important in this entire round because it happens really quickly and it short circuits all of their impacts. Insofar as the United States comes back, they drop all 4 justifications for this. This has literally never been contested. Go to their case. Their case is really hard to vote on. They just say like drone strikes are increasing now and like that leads to like state collapse and like the social fabric is torn. Remember, 1, it's super nebulous. 2, you don't know the bright line of like when these states collapse. But like 3, they're not really winning time frame and outweighing really well, unlike they're saying, because you don't know when this is happening. Instead, they like drop our meta weighing, so our time frame weighing analysis comes before this. But even so, we're winning this argument really completely because if we have a war, then we're going to have drone strikes. They drop this fact. I've said this since rebuttal. That's really important insofar as the war is triggered, then we're gonna have more drone strikes on more civilians. This is a link turn on their case, war increases in their world. But then they try to read alliances. They don't really give you any empirics for this. They just assert that it happens quickly, but years of not trusting people is not going to lead to alliances. So overall, we see that Saudi is like feeling really abandoned. It's going to lash out, beat back the Iranian threat, and it's going to plunge us into this war that brings everybody back into the region, killing all of their impacts. You have no choice but to vote for Neg.
Good round.
Good round.
Good round.
Okay, give me a little bit of time, like 2 minutes.
If you said something, I didn't hear you.
Like I said, give me 2 minutes. I'll look.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, I voted for the pro. Let's start on the con case. Let's start on the underview about resurgence or the return of U.S. troops. So I agree that I think, Blake, I think you should have made it more explicit how your two responses to the war scenarios interact with this. But my understanding of the round is, even if it's true, you give me 4 reasons why the U.S. would end. I'm putting aside durable fiat and whether I think the U.S. would re-enter the conflict with troops, because I think that violates, I guess, the principle of the affirmative. But yeah, whatever, it doesn't matter. But even if they come back into the region, I think you still have to link in that there are two. You still have to win your 2 links that something would trigger them to re-entry, right? So it has to either be the Iran scenario or the Saudi Arabia scenario. And so on the Saudi Arabia scenario, like, they extend this link throughout the round that the only reason Saudi Arabia would feel insecure is if MBS in particular felt like his interest in the region or in the country were at stake. I mean, they extend pretty clearly that he's consolidating power in such a way that he has no risk of feeling insecure. Your argument is no, it's Iran that makes him feel insecure. It makes him feel insecure because if he loses the war or if he's not acting aggressively enough, there's something internal to Saudi Arabia that disrupts him. Now, if your argument is distinct from that, I need better explanation as to why MBS as a consolidation of power doesn't solve back for that problem. It doesn't even matter if Iran, if Saudi Arabia views Iran aggression as causing insecurity. It's insecurity in the region because if they can't respond to it, MBS loses power. So if there's a reason why you can spike out of the consolidation of power internal warrant, that's fine. I just need better explanation as to why. So I don't think it's very probable that you get linked into the Saudi Arabia scenario. Now, I think it's more likely that you can probably get access to the Iran scenario. I think this is the chicken or egg problem that I've seen in every debate, though. One side says aggression causes them to withdraw. One side, the lack of aggression causes them to withdraw, et cetera, right? The back and forth. Now, you extend this warrant saying they want a seat at the table, and that's the reason why that's the reason why they respond to aggression or not. And regardless if the U.S. presence is pulled out, they're going to be aggressive because they want to see the table. The other side says no, and they send the Jones evidence that they don't want to upset the political order. The only reason they're acting aggressively is because the U.S. is preventing them from, I guess, fulfilling whatever manifest destiny they want, and that by voting affirmative, they no longer have an interest to continue on because that upsets the political order and actually prevent them from having a seat at the table. Look, I don't know how to resolve these competing interests, right? There's probably good reasons why both sides would want access. Sorry, there's probably good reasons as to why Iran would respond to U.S. aggression or wouldn't respond. But how do I compare they want to sit at the table versus they don't want to upend the political order? So I think you have to say there's 2 reasons, something like precedent or motivations or intent or internal politics or, I don't know, the Ayatollah response to X, Y, and Z. I don't know how to resolve like both sides saying, when X happens, Iran responds Y. No, they respond Z, right? I need better reasons to prefer why Iran responds. I do think earlier in the debate, I think Westridge had some, I think, empirical analysis, and maybe that's something you could have done a little more comparative evidence analysis on, saying, look, this is what happens empirically. But if you leave the debate up to sort of the theoretical warrants as to what they want on a much more macro scale, it's hard for me to be able to evaluate what is true and what's not. Because it's probably true that they don't want to upend the political order in a situation that would actually cause harm to them that's more counterproductive than not. But it's also probably true they want to sit at the table. I don't know how regression responds to that. But even if I agree with the seat at the table crisis scenario, like, again, in terms of probability weighing, I think Blake does a very good job of saying, look, all of this is, equally as nebulous, if not nebulous more. And even if your time frame weighing is true that this situation happens faster and the bright line from the affirmative on drones should have already been triggered, or we don't know it's going to be triggered, I don't know what even the approximate probability of this scenario is going to be. I'm going to vote on probability weighing anytime, even if you have more sense of even if your conflict's more likely to happen in terms of immediacy. I don't even know what the relative probability of this conflict is happening. All I hear is that they want to sit at the table, and if you pull out, that's going to be enough to put them over. The same bright line analysis that you put on the affirmative also probably applies to you, right? I mean, why has this happened before and we had a previous recall? You yourself, put that evidence in the round, etc. So the problem is that if I have enough doubts on the sort of war scenarios from Saudi Arabia and Iran, it makes it very difficult for me to pull the trigger to, again, get access to your underview that the U.S. will return, engage in more conflicts, so that then you could link turn or impact turn the drone. So obviously then on drones, if I don't think you're getting an increase in drone strikes, I don't think you can get access to the turn. And then of course the mitigation in the round, just about 24 miles, obviously isn't negating or isn't terminal defense, because the Persian Gulf is 700 miles long, and just because you have 24 miles and some other base in Uzbekistan Pakistan, they point out that drone strikes are still increasing, status quo, safeguards are disappearing. So there's enough uniqueness to suggest to me, in the short term, the most probable way for me to change any sort of body count in the region is probably coming from then. And I'm not too concerned about an improbable war scenario that come back that will increase drone strikes. So I think to resolve that sort of problem for me, I think you have to do a better job of either winning one of the two links, and then if you're winning the Iran link, telling me why why that scenario plays out in the next week or 2 weeks, because I'm never convinced that you actually get that BDC as much. And if you resolve that, I think I could probably have flipped the Wang and voted for the negative. So that's how I saw the round. Any questions? Okay, it was a good one. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.